There's a number of places that you can purchase cattle. Most feedlotters do prefer to have animals that have come from a paddock direct into the feedlot. And the reason that's important is that there's a level of stress that's encountered once an animal is moved from one environment into another. It doesn't mean that purchasing cattle from sale yards is not a very important option, because it is. But most feedlotters would prefer to buy sale yard cattle and take them to a backgrounding environment en route to feedlot rather than direct. So you don't have two stress events that create major problems with regard to the health of that animal. So what we like to see is an animal that comes direct from a property, either via a backgrounding facility or direct into the feedlot if they're at a target weight for the particular program you're running. There are a number of different programs in feedlots. The domestic weight animals that may only be 330 kilos at entry, through to a typical export weight animal that's between 400 and 500 kilograms as they enter the feedlot. The process to get them there is a process that we describe as backgrounding. Backgrounding is vital. It means that you can buy animals from different properties, from different social groups. You can put them together in weight ranges so that you only have to handle them a minimal amount of time. And those animals then get used to one another, so when they move into a feedlot, they are a group. They've already established a social structure and they move straight into a feed environment without any difficulty. When you're buying cattle for a feedlot, it's very important that you know a lot about the animals prior to their entry. You obviously need to understand breed, you need to understand their weight, but equally you need to understand the history that they have with vaccinations, the history with what feed that they've been eating prior to entry, particularly if an animal has been fed some supplementary products along with grass prior to entry. It can cause significant difficulties if you buy an animal that has been fed on a reasonably strong grain ration and then moves into a feedlot environment if the feedlotter doesn't know that beforehand. So understanding those issues is quite important.
We always have to remember as backgrounders we're producing cattle for a store market and not a fat market. It's quite important for the backgrounder to ensure that he keeps the cattle going forward on a constant plane of nutrition, yet ensures that they don't become over fat or too forward. We do the fattening process here at the feedlot.
The second thing that really is important is if we can have these cattle pre-vaccinated, mainly for the respiratory vaccines. The respiratory issues is our biggest health challenge, and if these cattle are pre-vaccinated on the farm with the products that are available, then these outcomes ensure very robust immune systems at the feedlot sector. So what needs to happen in these situations is they're very versatile vaccines. They can receive their first shot at marking or about that time, or weaning for that matter, and then that first shot can be given to them any stage really up until 2 weeks before they come to the feedlot. And this would be with a Mannheimia vaccine, of which there are 2 on the market. And then the booster shots can be done at the feedlot at processing. The research tells us that the more vaccine shots that these animals get in them before they meet their respiratory challenge, the more robust the immune response will be and the better the health outcomes for those cattle. The third thing that the producer can do is to background those cattle, get those cattle into groups, make sure that the parasite control management is good, make sure they're marked, they're castrated, make sure they're dehorned. These are basic husbandry practices which any good cattle producer should do, but unfortunately over the years there's quite a few producers who don't do a lot of these procedures, and we sometimes have animals with horns turning up at the feed yard. Sometimes we have uncastrated bulls turning up in the feedlot, and really a feed yard isn't designed to do your management for you. It's designed to finish cattle, and that's what we do very well. So it's important that the producer realises that they have a role in the whole production chain. Risk assessment has always been a difficult thing to do because you're never really sure what the outcome's going to be, but there are some things that are important. We know that lightweight cattle are at more risk of having problems than heavier cattle, so cattle that are under 300 kilos have more problems. We know that sale yard purchased British cattle are of more risk than the Bos Indicus cattle or the Wagyu cattle or crossbred cattle. We also know that cattle that have shrunk, had more than 4% shrink, pose a bigger problem than cattle that have had less than 4% shrink. And the bigger the shrink, the bigger the problems, because this is directly related to rumen function and dehydration.
Ideally, I suppose the point that we really want to get through is we want cattle that are well socialised and have a very good vaccination history and are in store to forward store condition upon entry to the feedlot. Always remember, go back, if you're a backgrounder, to look at the weaning history of those cattle. If you're purchasing out of the sale yard, it doesn't hurt to go and ask what was the weaning history of these cattle before you purchase them. To have people who know the full history of their cattle and people who handle their cattle using low stress stock handling techniques, good and sound vaccination history is very important to us.